Alright guys, here's our video for tonight. Compare, order, and simplify integers. We have two learning targets. First learning target is students can compare and order integers. And the second learning target is students can find the opposite and absolute value of an integer. Make sure you write down the title. Again, write that title down in the margin, guys, so it's easy to see. Write down those learning targets so you know what the purpose of this lesson is for. Okay, I'm going to move on. We have a couple definitions to go over today. I mentioned the word opposites the other day. Opposites, guys, are two numbers that are the same distance from zero but in opposite directions. Okay, so they're both the same distance from zero, but that one goes in the positives and one goes in the negatives. So an example of opposites would be 5 and then going 5 in the negative, so that would be negative 5. Right? Another example would be let's do negative 100. So if I go negative 100 in the negatives, that means I'm going to go to positive 100 the other direction. They're both the same distance away from zero. Notice they're the same number, it's just one's positive and one's negative. That's what opposites are. Alright, so that negative sign there in front stands for the opposite of the positive number. Okay, it's going the same number of spaces away from zero, but in the other direction. Next, we talk about absolute value. Absolute value, guys, is just a number's distance away from zero. Direction does not matter, so we're just counting how many places away from zero is it. Now, we use these things called absolute value bars, so they're the two little bars that go up and down. Those are called absolute value bars. So an example of absolute value would be, well, if I wanted to know the absolute value of negative 15, well, that would be how many spots away from zero is negative 15. Direction doesn't matter, which means we don't care about it being negative. So the answer is just 15. So it comes out positive. All right. If I said the absolute value of 6, well, how many spots away from 0 is 6? 6 is 6 spots away from 0. So that would just be 6. So notice for absolute value that our answer just comes out to be positive. When we come out of these absolute value bars, our answer comes out positive. Okay? Because that's all we care about is its distance away from 0. Okay? Opposites, one direction, one's positive, one's negative. Absolute value is when we find the absolute value of a number, it comes out positive. Okay? If you have that written down, you can move on. If not, go ahead and pause. I'm going to move on. Okay? In our example number 1, we're going to compare using less than, greater than, or equal to. I'm going to use a number line to help me. You might not always have to use a number line. This is just an aid to help you. So if I make a number line here, and then I'm just going to put some rough numbers on there. There's 0, and then I'm going to do negative 5, and negative 10, and negative 15. I don't need to put all my numbers on there. Okay, I'm going to plot these. Negative 8 would be, well, negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8. So negative 8 is going to be about right there. Okay, negative 11 would go all the way to negative 10, and then negative 11. Okay, remember the negatives, it's kind of the opposites. You got to pay attention to that. Okay, numbers on the left are less. These are less to greater. Okay. Since the negative 8 is first, and the negative 8 is on the right of negative 11 in my number line, then negative 8 is going to be greater, so I'd say negative 8 is greater than negative 11. Notice it's like the opposite of what they would be if they're positive. 8 is less than 11, but in negatives it's the opposite, so that would be negative 8 is greater than negative 11. There's my number line. B, I could put this on a number line. This one I probably don't need a number line for. I'm just going to do negative 5 and 5. Okay, negative 5 would be right here. Okay, and then positive 5 would be right there. Okay, well, negative 5 is first. It's on the left, so that means negative 5 is less than 5. You probably don't need a number line for this because all negatives are less than all positives. Okay, or vice versa. All positives are greater than all negatives. Okay, that's how you compare. If you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm moving on. In example 2, we're going to order the integers. Now we're going to go from least to greatest. So in the first example, I'm going to make a number line. Alright, again, I'm going to go 0, I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6. Okay, you got to get really good with those negatives of counting to the left. Okay, those are, you think negative 6 is bigger, but it's actually smaller. You're getting smaller as you're counting, okay, because it's the opposite of the positives. Alright, I'm going to place these numbers. Here's negative 4, 6 would be right here, 0 would be right here, negative 3 would be in between negative 2 and negative 4, so there's negative 3, and then 2 would be right here. Okay, now I'm going to order them from least to greatest, so I'm going to start from the left to right and my number line. So that's going to be negative 4, negative 3, 0, 2, and 6. So when you're placing these guys, it's going to be negatives first, 0 if it's there, then your positives. And remember, the negatives is the opposite. Negative 4 is less than negative 3. For B here, look, they're all negatives. Okay, so I got to think of the opposite. In the positives, what would be the biggest number? That would be 75. But in negatives, that's the opposite. So that would be negative 75. Then what would be the next biggest number of what's remaining? That would be negative 60. But in negatives, it's the opposite. So that's negative 60 there. Okay, what's the next biggest? Would be 45. So in the negatives, that's the opposite. That's the next smallest. Okay, then we got negative 31 and then negative 12. So this is from least to greatest. Negative 75 is less than negative 12. Okay, so it's negative 75, negative 60, negative 45, negative 31, and negative 12. It's the opposite of what they would be in positives. All right, if you need to pause, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm moving on. All right, and in our last example, example 3, we're going to talk about simplifying. This includes opposites and absolute value. So opposites, guys, is going to be your negative sign. So that negative sign stands for opposite. Okay, so if I want to know, if I have a negative 4, this means I want the opposite of negative 4. I told you the opposite of negative 4 is the other distance away. So negative 4 would be going to the left 4 spots, so the opposite would be going to the right. So your answer here is positive. You have two negatives right there, a minus, a negative, that turns out to be a positive 4. It's the opposite of negative 4. Okay, here I want the opposite of 5. The opposite of 5 would be negative 5. Go in the other direction. Notice that just kind of went in front of there. Okay, in C, these are absolute value bars. So I want to know the distance away the negative 10 is from 0. So negative 10 is 10 spots away from 0. Okay, no negative sign, just 10 spots away from 0. Absolute value of 12, for example, D here, that's 12 spots away from 0. So that's just going to be 12. E, this is a tricky one. Okay, I have the absolute value of the opposite of the absolute value of negative 16. So this is two steps. First, I have to do the absolute value of negative 16, which is 16, and then I want to know what the opposite of that is. That's outside the bars, so that makes my number answer negative again. So the absolute value of 16 is 16, and then the opposite of that is negative 16. And then for F, I'm going to plug in a number here. I have a negative, and then I have to plug in that negative 4, so I'm going to use my parentheses, so I end up with a negative 4, which just like example A up there, the opposite of negative 4 is 4. So these last two are a little bit tricky. Okay, you got 2 steps to them is what you have. Okay, that's it. If you need to rewind or watch this over, go ahead. Otherwise, have a great night, and I will see you guys later.